Friday.
Okay.
Otherwise, it sounds like fun.
Yeah, cool. No problem. We'll take a rain check.
I will.
Smoke check.
Okay,
Exactly.
mics are on, everybody. So I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, May 10th, 2023 City Workshop. And we have 2 items on the agenda, and we have about an hour. So there kind of gets you in the idea of what time it might take. And the first one is our Fire Awareness Month presentation. Martin from our Community Development Department is here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate your time tonight, and good evening, commissioners, or excuse me, counselors, and those in attendance here.
We got a raise.
It comes with pay, right?
Yeah.
See, maybe that's my correction.
Right.
And those in attendance tonight, in person and online. So I want to be brief in my comments, as I want to yield the bulk of the time to our experts in the field. But May is Wildfire Awareness Month, and through that recognition, there's many activities that are taking place throughout the month, throughout the region, addressing wildfire and that awareness, mitigation, and preparedness. And thought it an opportunity to come before you here to provide some information regarding the efforts that are taking place here locally in our region in Sisters Country. Tonight I'm joined by Chief Johnson with the Sisters Camp Sherman Fire District, Ian Reed, District Ranger with the Deschutes National Forest, and Heather Miller, Fire Risk Reduction Specialist with the Office of the Oregon State Fire Marshal. What we want to cover is just acknowledging for you counselors who know the goals, but also for the community that those goals that you've established to address wildfire in the region, and then pass it to our experts to talk about the overall regional wildfire risks, and then dive into what's known as the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy, or more briefly, the cohesive strategy that's used to address the landscape, the communities, and the response to those events. And then any additional time for questions. So as you know, you've established goals to address wildfire mitigation and community resilience. Those include expanding partnerships and identifying grant opportunities with partners at the local, state, and federal levels, and continuing to partner in particular with the fire district and other agency partners to improve public awareness regarding preparedness and mitigation. So being here tonight is one of those efforts to continue with our ongoing partnerships with these agencies. And in the last year, we've developed and organized the Sisters Country Wildfire Mitigation Group, where we've brought together a variety of agency and jurisdiction representatives and we meet regularly to share information and programming that each are working on to then disseminate that to the community to continue to address what we know to be important in addressing wildfire in our region. Specific to community development and our development code, you've established a goal of updating our defensible space and structural hardening requirements. That's an ongoing effort. Initially, we were observing and waiting on the results of Senate Bill 762 that required the State Fire Marshal's Office to establish defensible space standards, as well as the State Building Code Division establishing building hardening requirements. Those continue to be in draft form as that legislation is implemented, but that does not mean that we haven't continued to explore and learn about those benefits of those various standards that can help address wildfire mitigation in our community. We've also looked to other jurisdictions such as City of Ashland, who in 2018 adopted into their development code similar standards. So we're exploring what those opportunities are, and we have it intended to roll out in this fiscal year, exploring and implementing those standards as schedule and time permits. And then lastly, continue implementing the Wildfire Resiliency Plan for the city's critical infrastructure and properties. That's under the purview of the Public Works Division, And I understand that program and plan to be implemented and ongoing in parts. We have a fuels reduction project that was completed near the Public Works headquarters and the sewer treatment plant, and actively working on projects at near well 1, as well as in the vicinity of the reservoir. So those efforts continue to be ongoing and supported by various grants that the city has been able to secure. So with that, I look to pass it to Ian Reed to take us through the first part of our presentation.
Hey, thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, City Council and Mayor Preeden. Thanks, Matthew, for the intro there. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about kind of a little context of why this is so important. I know as elected officials, you all know its importance, part of your city goals. But next slide, please. So I just wanted to start with a little history there. That outline in green is the Sisters Ranger District. It's about 320,000 acres, and over the last 20 years, more than half of it has burned in large wildfires. So that's just, there was a great couple slides that I would have loved to have shown today. We didn't have enough time, but if anybody's interested in them, let me know and I'll get them to you. And they were from Doug Graff from Oregon Department of Forestry, showing the last 30 years in fire history in the state. And it's staggering looking at the first decade, where the fires were, what types of fires they were, how few in number and how few in acreage. Second decade, that's when the things like the B&B fire and the Biscuit fire came into play. And they went from grass fires out in unpopulated areas into timber fires. And they increased in both frequency and in acreage, in size. And then the last decade, the one that we're in right now, you can see that those fires have shifted even more so from timber fires into now populated fires where they're actually burning through communities. So, so that's the landscape right there. Most of those fires kind of start in the crest and then kind of work their way east, pushed by westerly winds down into the lowlands where the communities are, including the city of Sisters. So next slide, please. The cohesive strategy is basically a three-legged stool, like Matthew mentioned earlier, and it's talks about resilient landscapes, safe, effective response, and then fire-adapted communities. And so it's all of those processes working together with agencies, individuals, and community leaders. So next slide, please. And I'm going to talk about resilient landscapes, and then Chief Johnson and Heather Miller are going to talk about the other two. So resilient landscapes, that's a lot of basically trying to manage fuels in the wildland setting. And so a lot of that work is thinning, mowing. I think a lot of folks in here have probably seen some of the recent mowing we did directly adjacent to city limits around the Ponderosa Best Western and between the city and Cascade Meadow Ranch subdivision. So, and then prescribed burning is kind of our final treatment. And we'll do both pile burns for slash material and then also underburns, which we're planning the one next to the high school and the middle school on Friday. So that landscape right there, that slide just shows basically the orange polygons are the fuels treatments that we've already completed around the city of Sisters. The red hash there are wildfires, fire scars, and then the green units are the ones that we have left to do to kind of fill in those gaps and kind of complete the network of treated fuels around Sisters and tying that into fire scars. Now, fire scars don't last forever, neither do prescribed fire treatments, but that's kind of filling in the gaps right there. Next slide, please. This one just shows a little bit more detail. We've completed so far about a third of those red polygons. This is just the prescribed firework for this year. We'll have another polygon hopefully checked off there after Friday, and then we'll kind of keep working our way. You can see over the last several weeks, we had a large training group in Central Oregon where we put them to work and did a lot of the underburning to support the agencies. And I'd like to point out, next slide, please. I'd like to point out that we also have been getting a lot of requests to do what's called cross-boundary burning. So going off of the national forest and burning on other jurisdictions, mostly private land. So we have about 10 landowners around Sisters area who would like to participate. The city is actually one of those landowners that we've been in conversations with about doing a cross-boundary burn near the water treatment plant. So really excited about that. This one just shows basically some other types of activities. In addition to the prescribed fire, some of those purple polygons, that's mowing. You can see there's that right outside of the Sisters city limits there. There's a lot of mowing work along Highway 20, and then some small tree thinning work out there in the green north of town in the Metolius Basin. Next slide, please. This just shows a couple other projects that we're working on in the planning stage. The one up there in the northeast quadrant is Cougar Rock, and that's about 2,800 acres north of town, kind of the Stevens Canyon area, pretty close to Sisters. You can kind of see from the vicinity map. It's only about 5 miles away from town. And then the other project down there in the southwest corner is Green Ridge, which is kind of between Sisters and Camp Sherman. That's about a 20,000 acre landscape. The other thing we're working on for the Deschutes National Forest is a planning project to go back into our previous treated areas and reburn those. A lot of times, a lot of the projects, the decision only authorized one treatment. And so we're working on actually having authorization to go back in and reburn those through maintenance treatments. And I think that's the last slide. I'm gonna turn it over to our next speaker.
Could I ask?
Yeah. Is it okay?
Just on that last slide, I just want a little clarification. When I was looking at that map before, what are the dots? Are those residents?
Those are structures.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Good question.
Okay, so next we'll talk about fire adapted communities. Thank you for your time today, Mayor and councilors. So with the cohesive strategy, fire adapted communities is certainly an important piece of that. And this graphic here really shows what it takes for a community to become fire adapted. And so if you think of that as like a whole pie, you can take a look at the different slices of it and see where you might fit into that and what pieces you might take a bite of, I guess you could say. And I would say for most of us, we could identify with at least one, if not more of those in there. And it really does take the whole community, it takes the agencies, it takes local government to partner together to really make it all work and achieve that fire adapted community. So just wanted to bring that to light. Next slide, please. So when we talk about the loss of structures and the loss of communities, really what we're talking about is with that increased intensity with wildfires in the area is we've got to prepare for those ember showers that are going to come our way, because as those fires are burning through those trees, it's what's generating those embers, and those embers travel for miles ahead of the fire and can threaten the structures. And so as you look at the picture on the right-hand side, you can notice that there's a lot of houses that have been lost in that community, and the vegetation is still pretty green. And so it's the embers that have entered into those structures and burned those structures down, and it's not the vegetation that's burned so much next to it. So really want to emphasize that piece about needing to harden structures or protect those structures from those embers to really protect our communities. Next slide. So when we're talking about structural hardening, we're really talking about how do we just defend from those embers, whether we're looking at the construction materials of our roof, the maintenance of our roof, what kind of condition it's in and what's on it, making sure that we're keeping the debris off of it and that sort of thing. Taking a look at the vent screening around the structures and making sure that it's a small enough mesh that it prevents embers from entering in. A lot of the building codes currently only require like a 1/4 inch on the mesh screening, and research has shown that an 1/8 inch is really effective in stopping those embers from entering a structure. So it's one of those simple fixes that can be done. You can buy 1/8 inch screening to replace around your structure, and something that could be very effective in protecting your home. Taking a look at siding and making sure that's in good shape, and just really working down around your house, working on that maintenance, and looking at ways that we can protect it from embers from igniting the structure. Next slide, please. And so with a piece of that is also how we manage the vegetation around that structure and that defensible space that we create around there. And again, it's a lot of maintenance and just how we can organize that vegetation to best protect our home from any ember showers and any kind of loss there. So the big focus is in that first 5 feet around the structure and making sure there's nothing there that will catch on fire. And if we can do that, then we certainly increase the probability of saving our homes if there was an ember fire. That's the most important area. You can work outside of that more or to your property line, but really that first 5 feet is what we want to emphasize for folks, that if we can make that non-combustible, then we can protect our structures. Next slide, please. And so with that, just taking a look at vegetation management again, and just like some tree spacing and things of that sort. And it's really just that, closer to the home, we want things to be a little more spread out. Farther away from the home, they can be a little closer together. We're just really trying to manage intensity of fire as it approaches the structure. Next slide, please. Okay, I think that's it, and I'll pass it on to Chief Johnson unless there's any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Heather? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Looks like we're doing good on time, Matt. Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. And I'm going to talk about effective response as we think about the cohesive strategy. We talked about the landscape. We've talked about fire adaptive communities, and then I'm going to address the response component. If we can go to the next slide, Matt. This is a map of Sisters Country. In the center is the city of Sisters in sort of the dark brown. But what I wanted to point out is that we're really pretty fortunate to have 3 separate fire departments in the region. We have the Cloverdale Fire District, the Sisters Fire District that covers the city, and then we have Black Butte Ranch Fire Department. We also have the U.S. Forest Service right in the heart of town that has fire engines and staffing during our peak time. And we have Oregon Department of Forestry that is down on Highway 126. So we have 5 separate firefighting agencies. And I think the really neat thing about it for Sisters Country is that we all work so closely together. We train together, we respond together. Our communication system is integrated. Our incident commanders are trained to the same level to run these incidents. And it's really a coordinated response, which is just amazing that there's that level of cooperation and that many resources in a small area. So I think that's really important. The structural fire agencies, in the last 7 years, we've created what we call an interagency coordination working group. And we have really worked over the last 7 years to standardize equipment, standardize our fleet, location of equipment on the fire engines. We've standardized our training. We're in a standard training platform. All of our incident commanders have attended the same training and worked through that between all of the agencies. So there's a tremendous amount of behind the scenes work to make sure that all 3 of these agencies actually operate as one entity when there is a fire. So that's a lot of great work is going on behind the scenes. And we're also fortunate, we've got the Redmond Air Center just a few miles away, and not a lot of communities can say that they've got a tanker base, a smoke jumper base, hot shots. The amount of resources that we have in Central Oregon and right in our back door is incredible, and most communities in the state would be envious of what we have. Let's go to the next slide if we can. I want to talk about some state investments that are helping our response. Senate Bill 762 provided a lot of one-time funding for enhanced capacity in the state. And these are a couple initiatives that we've actually used in Sisters Country. One is the pre-positioning of resources. Prior to Senate Bill 762, we did not have the ability to mobilize state resources and bring them into our community before a fire occurred. We have that now, and we've utilized, I think, twice in Sisters Country. And the state will pick up the tab. They'll mobilize a task force based on weather conditions, fire risk, predicted lightning, predicted high winds, and they'll mobilize task forces and move them into Central Oregon. And that's been very effective. I think each time we've mobilized them into the region before a fire, they've been deployed to an emergency incident in the region. So that's a new program that's worked really well. And they've also implemented a program called Immediate Response. And this is designed to send state resources into the region short of a governor-declared conflagration. And we'll talk about conflagrations a little bit more. But that's a way to get our closest adjoining counties to send resources when we need them now. They'll send them. We don't have to go through the governor declaration process. The state will approve the response. They'll pick up the tab and they'll send task forces into our region immediately. Let's go to the next slide if we can. So just wanted to provide an overview of what the response system looks like, starting at the local level, all the way through state conflagration invocation, as well as an EMAC request or assistance from other states. And this is a flow chart of the Oregon Fire Mutual Aid System. All fires start and end local. If we have a fire in the region that exceeds our ability, then we'll go to the next step, which is local mutual aid. We have prearranged agreements with all the Tri-County Fire Department agencies. It's ran through the 911 center. We just pick up the radio and say, we need an additional task force. It's predetermined. 911 center sends the tones and they're coming our way. So that's really a great resource, and the three counties work collectively to protect and help each other as much as we can. If it goes beyond what the three counties can provide, then we have expanded mutual aid agreements that we've enacted within the last 4 years. We have agreements with Lynn County, Lane County, and Klamath County. Once we exhaust all of our resources, and even if we don't need help, we have a plan to notify those counties and let them know we've got a large fire, we may need help. We're not asking for it yet, but start spinning up, start getting your resources ready. And then those counties will send those mutual aid. It's called inter-county mutual aid. And it's already preloaded who's going to come. And that's a relatively new program that we've implemented within the last 4 years. Once we exhaust inter-county mutual aid, then we have statewide mutual aid, which would be governor-declared conflagrations. And this would send resources from anywhere in the state. The state of Oregon picks up the cost of that. And we've utilized this quite frequently, unfortunately. We have task forces from other counties in Sisters and in Central Oregon quite a bit. And it's a great resource. And it's been very effective at helping to protect homes. If we exhaust all statewide resources, all 50 states in the nation have a mutual aid pact between the states. It's the Emergency Management Assistance Compact, or EMAC, and that's managed through Oregon Emergency Management. But as we'll see when we get to the next slide, it's not uncommon that we need help from our neighboring states. And it's not uncommon that we go help other states, and primarily California. We've sent our sisters units into California multiple times in the last few years to help out. Let's go to the last slide. So this is what it actually looks like when we talk about those 5 levels of response. The Labor Day fires of 2020, there were 57 task forces mobilized across the state. There were 8 state-to-state mutual aid requests from Utah, Idaho, Minnesota, North Dakota, and Washington, all sent resources into Oregon. There were 113 separate Oregon fire departments that responded to those fires. There's only 300 fire departments in the state. 113 of them were working and responding to the Labor Day fires. 300 pieces of apparatus, 650 firefighters, and you can see the results of those fires. Thankfully, we hope that's once in a century event, but I thought it was a good example of how the system can flex up, how local responders in each of those communities received assistance from around the state and from other states, and how the coordinated response system works, I guess, on a statewide basis. And that's all I had, unless anybody had any questions for me.
Me too.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up to what I think is an excellent thing that's going on, the 3 districts in the area working together. I think equipment in the same location on every truck, that's sort of the standardized equipment. Special districts have board changes. Those new boards oftentimes have different agendas. Sometimes certain individuals decide to retire and someone come in and take their place. So what kinds of things, I think that's an excellent thing that's going on. What kind of, what's the word I want? How permanent is that? How safe is it from the wills and wayances of elected officials and or an individual coming in who kind of wants to have their own little fiefdom and not be a part of the other ones?
I like to hope that it's resilient and will last. I think through a lot of this, right, it's not just a commitment from the administrative staff. It's a line level staff. It's the volunteers. So it's an organization-wide sort of commitment and buy-in to the philosophy. So I hope that there's a lot of support, not just from the elected or just from the administrator. It's top to bottom, and I think people have seen the benefits of it, and I think everybody recognizes the risk, and not one of us has enough capacity to deal with everything that we may need to deal with. We need each other. We rely on each other. So my hope is it'll be resilient regardless of changes.
That would be mine as well. Just kind of,
Yep.
what you said was what I wanted to hear, I think, and congratulations on your impending retirement.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I wanted to ask how is the cooperation with our power companies in evaluating, when they become involved because of high winds and things like we've seen happen in California?
I would say my experience with the local utilities has been very positive and very proactive. I think the council knows there's been some legislative changes and rules that have been put in place that require the power companies to have emergency plans and work with the local agencies through that process, through the plan development process, and they've reached out, and I would say very good communications. And I did have the opportunity to participate in an after action review for the last wind event we had in Northern Oregon, where the power companies exercised their public safety power shutoffs for the first time. And it was pretty incredible. The amount of damage that was identified to the electric grid after the wind event that didn't result in a fire because of the public safety power shutoffs was remarkable. And they went through the slides, and there would have been several fires ignited as a result of that windstorm if they wouldn't have done the public safety power shutoff. So I think the system will work, and it is working, and I would say there's great communication locally with the responding agencies and the utility providers.
That's good to hear that it was a successful example.
Yes.
And coordinated.
Yeah.
So that means even PG&E and some of the multi-state groups got involved,
They did.
as opposed to our local co-op and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there was a public safety power shutoff here. And I know the utilities are investing a lot in detection cameras and monitoring systems for their utilities as well. And they're participating in work groups that we are statewide for wildfire detection cameras. So they're really engaged on a statewide basis in these issues. They're concerned certainly about the public and the risk to the public, but also their infrastructure and their systems. There's a lot of reasons to be engaged and be working with all of the parties. And I would say from my involvement with them, they're doing a good job, and they're doing what they need to do.
So when you were describing that you can mobilize pre-fire, what initiates that mobilization pre-fire?
Yep. Each county has a designated fire defense board chief for the county. I serve in that role currently for Deschutes County, but Crook and Jefferson County also have a fire defense board chief. So at any time, if the fire defense board chief feels that there's an imminent threat to their county, they can request these resources from the state. But I would say that the state monitors it as closely as we do. And often when they've been mobilized in this event, usually the state is reaching out saying, hey, this is what we're seeing for the weather. This is what we're seeing, for projected lightning. And they're tracking resource availability across the state as well. So every county, every Monday morning is required to report available assets to mobilize across the state. And the state has a dashboard of all of those assets on a weekly basis. So the state knows, what the availability looks like in Oregon if there were problems. So they've got the resource data, they monitor the weather data, and together they look at that and they'll proactively reach out and say, we would like to move a task force into your region. Will you host them? It's like, we would love to have them. And when they're in town, then we'll take them out and we'll show them the area. We'll talk about the local risk. We'll show them our target hazards. And they'll spend their days training and learning the communities that they're based in.
Thank you very much.
I have a question about the air suppression resources and the smoke jumpers out at Redmond Airport. When there's multiple fires, who's in charge of that? Who makes the call of if there's areas where it could be used in 2 or 3 areas, who makes the call of where those resources go?
I'll probably turf that, Mr. Mayor, to my good friend Ian at the end of the table there, because they're his resources.
Okay, great.
Well, but before I answer that, I wanted to just build on Chief's last thoughts a little bit. We'll do the same thing with federal resources. We'll pre-position and during lightning events or high fire danger events. And so we'll do the same thing. We'll staff up. We'll bring in out of area resources on what we call severity. And then for the what we call the national resources, so like that would be smoke jumpers, repellers, hotshot crews. Those are prioritized out of, we have a regional coordination center up in Portland, and those national resources are prioritized by what we call the GAC. Now, there's a lot of talking back and forth with Portland between like our fire staff for Central Oregon, our federal fire staff, Kevin Stock. Kevin talks a lot to, the agency administrators in the region, like myself, the other district rangers, the forest supervisors. So we're kind of in constant communication on a daily basis as well. And then when we have multiple starts, like a lightning bust, we have duty officers that are basically looking at all the incidents. They're talking to the agency administrators, which are like folks like me and the forest supervisor and the district ranger in Bend and Crescent. And then we're kind of prioritizing values at risk. And that's how a lot of those resources are assigned. So I don't know if that helps. When it's peak fire season, we don't just call Redmond and say send the hotshot crew over, because a lot of times they're not there in Redmond or Prineville. They're actually assigned to a high priority incident in California or Colorado or Montana. They're going all over the country because they're a national asset.
Gotcha. So because of mutual aid, sometimes when something happens here, we just don't have it, and then
might get a hotshot crew from Alaska. We might get the Midnight Suns. We might get, the Flagstaff hotshots. We might get, there would be, because then their fire season in the Southwest is kind of, it might taper off because of the monsoon. So, Flagstaff becomes available, or one of the Southwest hotshot crews. So it's a system. It really is a system, and it's a national and really an international system. In the federal fire service, we'll use resources. We have agreements with Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. And we help them out. They help us out in years like 2002 and 2020. And then, we might enter into a unified command with the Oregon State Fire Marshal's resources and their incident commander, because they're kind of responsible for structures and private property. And then our incident management team would handle the fire and the wildland setting. But we work really well together in unified command. We've unfortunately had to do it a lot in recent years, and it's been very successful. And I've seen a lot of positive. I was the agency administrator on the Cedar Creek fire last year out of Oak Ridge when Oak Ridge was evacuated. And I'll tell you, there were a lot of lessons learned from the 2020 Labor Day fires that were put into play last year in Oak Ridge and Cedar Creek. So
nice. Thanks. We really appreciate the down under jumpers, so. Does anybody else have any final questions?
Yeah, I just have a last question that, so 762 is, going through the meat grinder, as a, municipality in a high fire danger area. uh, what would you recommend us doing at this point? There, the TAC, a year or two ago was that in regards to code changes that we'll wait and see what the state does first, we don't need to be redundant. It's feeling like, we might not be seeing recommendations out of the state that might be the best suited for our community to be as well prepared as possible. So it's a little bit politically loaded question, but answer as comfortably as you'd like, but
Give it to the chief, he's on the way out.
but we're constantly reviewing our codes and want our community to be as safe as possible, and we know that there are some key pretty minor, or a few handful of things that could be easily changed in our code that could help our community. So yeah, do you have any advice at the moment, or?
Well, I'll let Heather fill in some gaps on, as a state agency, what they're going to do. But, I really think my sense is, 762 was a landmark piece of legislation. It is super comprehensive, and there is a lot of pressure to modify it and fine tune some things, right? So I think there are going to be some changes that come to it. But my sense is there's going to be an education first component likely going forward. I think a lot of the agencies are going to be really pushing a public education, trying to encourage people. There'll be a lot of incentive programs and grant programs to get people to do some of this defensible space and maybe some hardening for at-risk groups. So if I were to look into what I see, I guess, I just see that. I don't see a heavy-handed regulatory thing coming anytime soon. I think it's really important that we all work together with a cohesive voice and educate and encourage the community to do these things. There's going to be a lot of tools available for defensible space tools online. There's a lot of information already on how to harden your home and make your home more resilient. So I don't think there's any need to wait. I think there's opportunities for people to do the right thing today. And my sense is that there's not a huge appetite for super heavy-handed regulatory stuff coming from the state. You're seeing it even with the wildfire risk map. It's sort of being re-looked at, and it was pulled back, and there's a lot of discussion about what the map looks like. You're seeing discussion around insurance and not using the map for insurance. So my general sense is things are sort of tamping down a little bit and going towards that more educational incentivization route, is my sense. But I would defer to Heather from the state's perspective.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think that our office has said on many occasions that that's certainly their approach, is to take that educational push first and certainly not come down with the regulation hard and heavy. Because of the way that 762 was written, everything was based off of that map. And so because of the map being rescinded, it put everything on hold. So, but we do have a draft of what the Defensible Space Code looks like. And the same thing with the hardening code as well. And so I would encourage you guys to take a look at what those drafts look like. And the way that codes work is that you can't be less restrictive, but you could certainly match or be more restrictive. And I don't anticipate a lot of changes being made to those drafts if they were adopted. And so that may be a place to start for you.
Just to follow up on that, I've seen some of the videos showing what embers do when they go through that 1/4-inch screen versus the 1/8-inch screen in terms of test buildings and that sort of a thing.
Yes.
It seems to me that we have a responsibility in a community surrounded by trees to not wait for the state for those kinds of simple things to do. Siding may be a tough one, but maybe that's not. But the main thing, the easiest thing, the simplest thing is to approach those ember incursion points, as was illustrated in the picture that you showed. And that's something that could be done tomorrow, in my opinion. I realize that not quite that easy, but.
Well,
Friday, man.
yeah.
But I think that, but is it your, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you agree that as elected officials worried about the safety of our community, to make sure that all new building that goes up at least has some of the difficult to replace but easy to do things done, such as quarter-inch screening in the eaves?
No, I appreciate that approach to it for sure.
Eighth inch, thank you.
Yeah, to the eighth inch, yeah, for sure. You know, there's studies out there that show that they compare what the hardening standards would cost versus what traditional construction costs are, and there really is not much of a difference. Headwaters Economics has done a lot of studies on that. It's something to take a look at for sure. And there are simple things, you're right, that you could do that would make a huge difference. And if people start with that, you know, because a lot of times people think, okay, well, my house is built to code, so it's going to be safe, right? But if our codes aren't up to what research is showing us, then there is that opportunity for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I certainly don't want more government and more rules, but code, like you just said, sometimes code has that opposite effect of like almost comfort, you know, like, oh, it's up to code. It must be safe. Somebody looked into this, as, you know, smarter people than me decided these things. You know, all of those rules are written in blood. So we just want to take care of our community. So appreciate it.
We have fear of fire, and you rightly should. I mean, it's uncontrollable at points.
Yeah. Awareness and respect for it. Excuse me, Counselor. Yeah.
No, it's okay.
And the town has burned down a couple times already, so we're trying to.
It's been since the 1920s,
Yes.
so let's, we have a good record
We're on a
recently.
good streak right now.
Is it true that our fire department offers a service where a person from the fire department would inspect one's property, home, and recommend things? Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And I mean, so if we were to communicate that, would you be willing, I mean, would you be able to support a swamp of people in the next couple of months wanting to have that kind of service?
We just trained how many new people yesterday,
You
Heather?
had 3 people there yesterday, but we hosted a half-day workshop yesterday on defensible space and home hardening, and we had a number of community members there from some of the local HOAs, as well as Matt and some of the fire corps members. So we're getting there little by little, and there's certainly a lot of regional outreach going on and trying to get people up to snuff. But yeah, you're right, that's a great way to approach it.
Yeah, so I mean, you just call and make an appointment, is that what you do?
Yep.
Okay.
And
It's really unfortunate that Matt knows as well, because he'll get.
Where the hell is everybody?
I'm not certified as a fire corps member, but maybe sometime in the future.
And we did just receive a State Fire Marshal's Office grant that will allow us to hire a new full-time position. And part of their responsibilities are going to be working in this space, in community risk reduction space. So they'll be our conduit for Firewise communities within the fire district and within the community. So it's going to be some added capacity of a full-time paid employee to do some of that work within the community. So we're excited about that too.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Great presentation.
Well, if I just take the opportunity to thank our panelists for joining us here today. I think what was really a broad takeaway from these closing remarks were that there's actions that can be taken today by individual property owners to educate themselves on the risks and mitigation measures, and perhaps those low-cost, high-benefit measures that can take place from the screening, home hardening, and then those more long-term, higher-cost measures that an individual can plan for. Right now, immediately, and then long-term, looking at where the city can look to regulatory measures to then implement through our development code. So immediate impacts and then long-term benefits that we'd be exploring into the future.
Yeah, do you recommend firewood stacked on the front porch to the soffits? Is that a good idea, or?
Yeah, it's probably
Only if
not
it's-
the best
only if it's
idea.
shielded by the house.
With gasoline
Cans, right?
cans
sitting
right
up
next to
Right
it,
next to it, yeah.
right below the
Okay.
stovepipe.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Good.
Thank you.
Appreciate the
We've all
opportunity.
seen
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
That's why we love living here.
Okay. Next up is the review of fiscal year 21-22 audit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you. So we have Rob Tremper here. He is partner at Dickey Tremper. They are our auditors for the fiscal year ended 2021-22. So we're going back in time just a little bit. So just try to keep that in mind with the dates and whatnot. So without further ado, Rob, take it away. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'll let you get started with the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So obviously the audit's a little bit later than normal. Definitely were some, I think, staffing issues both at the city level and at our level as well. And some other delays in implementing new accounting standards this year. There was a pretty major standard that had to be implemented on leases, and it kind of revamped the way that leases get reported in your financial statements. And so you know, a lot of those push things back, but at the end of the day, we're able to issue you know, a clean or unmodified audit opinion, which is kind of the goal. And I think other than some of those things holding things back, the audit itself went pretty well. There are a couple letters I want to try to go through, and a small piece of the financial statement, but the letter that you have should be on, that I've shared on the screen, is kind of a follow-up letter to one we send out usually in July or August, giving you a general idea of what our audit plan is. And it now lists in there, you know, what are our, you know, audit risks that we're doing specific steps to kind of look at a little bit closer. That's kind of a newer thing in some of those letters. And then also gives you an opportunity to give us feedback and let us know if there's areas you want us to look at. So I think the responses we get out of those are very helpful, and we do try to incorporate them in the audit plan. But a few things in the wrap-up letter I wanted to point out. You know, first of all, management is ultimately responsible for the financial statements themselves, but also the selection and use of appropriate accounting policies. So those are all described in the big first of the notes to the financial statements. But in this year, I mentioned GASB Statement 87 for leases was the major change. A lot of work to get to that, but at the end of the day, I think it brought in, you had to recognize about 400,000 of lease receivables. Most of your lease payables, like your operating type leases, switched over to where they'd be assets and liabilities. Your operating leases were pretty minor, so it really was more on the lease receivable side, with like your tower leases being the bigger dollar amounts in there. So basically with that standard, you recognize the fixed payments over the life of the lease as an asset up front, and then still the revenue over that time period. So quite a bit of work to go through to get into that. But other policies really didn't change, and all significant transactions of it were recognized in the proper accounting period. So you know, I think that's, you know, a positive thing. At the end of the day, there had some cutoff issues, a few journal entries, but at the end, you know, the financial statements are materially correct. Also, if we have accounting estimates, we try to point those out. You know, capital assets is one that's a big estimate in most places. Nobody could say exactly how long your building's going to last, but we take a estimated useful life and write it off over that life, and hopefully that keeps up with maintenance and improvements you need to do until it's time to replace it. A new estimate here is with the lease receivables and related deferred inflows of resources, because they kind of offset each other. So that's based on a present value of the leased assets and your incremental borrowing rate. And so we've looked through most of those assumptions as it went through, and worked with Joe on calculating those. Also, the two larger ones have to do with other post-employment benefits that you have to require your employees to stay on your health insurance plan, even though it's at their cost. As a rule for PERS, that there's an implicit liability there. It gets measured by actuaries, and then also with the big buzzword is the unfunded pension liabilities that are out there, statewide, really nationwide. Those actually got a little bit better, at least slowed down on the growth this year. I was going to touch on that when we look at some of the numbers, but both of those estimates takes an actuary to measure those, and Milliman, I think, does both. Milliman does the actuarial evaluation for that, and we go through the valuation reports and tie out what we can, but we have to rely on the actuaries on some of those pieces. Really didn't have any significant difficulties with management in performing, cleaning and completing the audit. Really just some of the delays that I talked about already. And then under professional standards, if we have material adjustments that were posted or uncorrected adjustments, we try to point those out. There were adjustments that got posted during the audit. The only one that ended up being material was the city received some of the COVID, the ARPA monies, and all the monies went into the general fund, but the expenses got paid out of like the sewer fund and I think water, sewer, and streets. And I think the plan was to move those next year, but for matching purposes of revenues versus of expenses, those had to end up moving back to the funds that the monies were reimbursing the costs for. So that was a large adjustment between the funds. That was the only material adjustment we ran into during the audit. At the back of this letter is a list of unrecorded adjustments, or past adjustments, whatever you want to call them. But on these, instead of doing a prior period adjustment, there was an error found in some of the formula error in last year's depreciation schedule. So instead of doing a prior period adjustment, that was ran through this year. An ongoing one, which isn't a problem, but we still have to put it on our past adjustments list, is technically, let's say your utility billings go from mid-June to mid-July, that at June 30th you would have had 15 days of unbilled utility receivables there. And so we kind of measure that every year, and at the end of the year there was about 22,000 that we could have accrued in for water and about 25 for sewer. That is a little bit higher than what it was the year before. So that's an ongoing one, not a problem. Other piece was we had a past adjustment last year, and this just reflects how it came into this year. And then I think at the very end of the audit, there was an accounts payable that was found, but everybody didn't want to redo the financial statements for $3,000. So those will all run through the next year, and except for this one, will probably be a recurring past audit adjustment. So also on this letter, we have items that I think are more suggestions or items to keep an eye out for. So during the audit, there we go. Can you hear me again?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I guess that meant so you were tired of me talking. It said the host muted me. So there's full accrual type balance adjustments that haven't gotten entered the last couple of years. We did provide those adjustments to the city, and so we're just recommending those get posted in there for this year, and just so that there's some continuity on what's going through there. Also, you guys have some abnormal assessments that where you write off basically a portion of them each year, and a couple of the sidewalk assessments, only 50% of the total assessment is supposed to be getting written off, and actually that it met that 50% amount last year, and so we backed that, but it was continued to get written off in this current year, so we backed that off to where it got back to the 50% level. And so I think that should be fixed going forward, but that's one to just keep an eye out, that there's some, definitely different agreements on some multiple assessments that you've got going on in there. So on this letter, other than that boilerplate language as to what are our responsibilities in each of these sections, the other letter I think that is more important is the letter where we report what would be considered either a significant deficiency or a material weakness. So really, definition of a deficiency in internal control is when the design or operation doesn't allow for management or employees in the normal course of performing their duties to prevent, detect, or correct misstatements on a timely basis. Material misstatement is one where, if it would be, it could or actually does lead to the financial statements being materially misstated. And we had really only one item that fell into that because we did make a material adjustment for the ARPA funds. So we've kind of already discussed that one. So that was our only material adjustment and only item that got reported as material weakness. But we did have a couple other deficiencies that related to kind of the implementation of GAS 87. So there was definitely some difficulties on getting the final leases identified and the terms and initial measurements that, things went back and forth quite a bit. And I think with the actual measurement and value of that changed quite a bit based on what those final decisions were. At the end of the day, those numbers and figures look accurate and reflect the activity. And then another one we kind of ran into is that really none of the supplemental budgets were reflected, at least in the trial balance that got provided to us. And so I'm not sure if it was in, well, I would assume it wasn't in your guys' system, to be able to do, some of the oversight that needed to be done, because the trial balance that came to us was exported out of your system. So that did come later, I think towards the end of the audit, and we were able to get those reflected in there correctly. So as the city goes, I think those were the main pieces that we came across. And, we do have the city's financial statements, but I know we have really short time frame here. Couple things to mention is that the city does issue an annual comprehensive financial report, which is kind of above and beyond what is required. It does take extra work by your staff and ours to do that, but it really exhibits your commitment to quality financial reporting. With that, there is an introductory section that gets added. Transmittal letter kind of describes the city and your certificate of achievement, which is the award that you get when you submit these, and showing that you've met this higher level of reporting. In here also is our independent auditors report. As I mentioned, we issued a clean audit opinion. The report itself is expanded. They changed the requirements. It's like 4 pages now. Fortunately, and I'll move to that. They've made it 4 pages now, but fortunately they've put the opinion right in the front, so nobody has to really read past that section. So our audit opinion is really based on opinion units. So there's multiple opinion units in the city's financial statements, whether it's government-wide activities, business type activities, major funds, and then the rest of the funds kind of all together. That's really the main where our opinions are, and we had unmodified opinions in all of those areas. Immediately following that's the management discussion and analysis, which is I think a good read as a council level, because it's written by management. We don't necessarily give an opinion on it, but we do read it and make sure it agrees to the financial statements, and provide suggestions if there's differences. But it gives you a good narrative as to what happened, some of the financial highlights, comparative tables. So that's a good piece to read through. And also at the end of the report is a statistical section, which gives you, in a lot of cases, a 10-year trend. The statement of net position and activities are on kind of similar to a for-profit business. So it's accounting, different type of accounting than you see during the year, but you see the ending net position on governmental activities and business type activities are pretty positive. Most of that is tied up in capital assets, but I think that's a lot better than, say, if you look at a school district, that most of those are going to be looking negative. And change in net position during the year was about a positive 5 million, which was pretty comparable to what it was the year before. And then lastly, wanted to touch on your balance sheet for governmental funds. These are basically on your budget basis that you use, every day. And, one thing to point out here is the fund balance on the general fund is, almost 2.8 million unassigned fund balance, or 3.2 for total fund balance. If you look at your revenues and expenditures for the general fund, you only had about 2.6 million of expenditures last year. So as a general rule of thumb, you usually want a minimum of, say, probably about 3 months worth of unassigned fund balance in the general fund, and you have, over a full year's worth in there. So it's a pretty healthy fund balance, I think, as we compare to a lot of other cities and organizations in there. And I know we're out of time, so I just wanted to, we also have urban renewal. Urban renewal didn't report any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, so they had no findings. And as for estimates, property taxes are really receivables, the only estimate that comes from the county. But we did have a couple things to point out in here, is that I think it was towards the last minute, Joe had an adjustment that he wanted to post to remove the deficit fund balance. The financials were pretty much written and finalized at that point. So there is a small deficit fund balance at the end of the year that the projects fund spent a little more than what they had for money. That should easily get reversed in the next fiscal year. But also one to keep an eye out for is that the definition of debt when you're looking at urban renewals is a lot more wide open than what you would see as a standard debt definition. But to issue property taxes, they have to have some sort of debt outstanding. And even if that's a contractual type obligation. So you want to make sure you continue to monitor that requirement, since they paid off all of their outside debt. And then lastly, same thing with the city, is the supplemental budgets just, weren't posted in the system at that point in time. So I know I went through that really quickly. Not a lot to go through on the city's, on urban renewals financial statements, other than that they also had a clean audit opinion. And at the end of the day, really their only assets and liabilities remaining are cash and cash equivalents and some property taxes receivable. And I think they're not much left in the project fund at year end. In fact, a little bit negative in the project fund, but still about 300,000 in the urban renewal debt fund. That's going to go towards paying down, debt, whether that's inter-fund type, borrowing from the city, or if we borrow again from the outside world. But there is some monies there to pay off debt or contractual obligations in there. So I know that was really quick, but I know I'm also over by 3 minutes. So is there, if you guys have any questions, I'm open to questions.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Just a quick one. I actually read it. You might not believe that, but I did. This is my 16th public agency audit. And I was very pleased at the thoroughness of what you did, but also with the fact that the information provided indicated that the city is being run real well, the money is being handled well, and with the exception of the ARPA funds, which we all kind of knew was going to be an issue for us anyway, things look really good. So thank you for your work. And I am pleased with what I saw, and also take your recommendations to heart. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add that I really enjoyed reading your forecasts.
Okay, anybody else? Anything? Joe, you want to add anything to that?
No.
Is this the point where I asked for a letter grade? Is that what we did a couple years ago?
Yeah, I guess it was, huh?
No, I won't do that to you. Looks like we don't have any further questions. Thank you for your work, and thank you for all the reports. We appreciate that very much. We do take it serious, and we're, for the most part, pretty pleased with our finance director. So thank you.
All right. Well, nice seeing you. And,
right. Thanks, Rob.
thanks.
Yeah, cash on hand. Hey. Okay, so that's the end of our workshop. I'm going to close the workshop. We're going to take 6. All right. I'd like to call to order the 6:30 PM City Council meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 10th, 2023. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Roll call, Carrie.
Mayor Preden,
Here.
Council President Blum,
Here.
Councilor Letts,
Here.
Councilor Ross,
Present?
Councilor Cobb.
Here.
All right. Next up is the approval of the agenda.
I would move approval of the agenda. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That was everybody. Thank you. We're on to visitor communication. I'm going to read a statement first, if that's okay. Recently, the City Council has been receiving public comments related to land use file SP 22-02, a site plan review application for the Space Age gas station. Please be advised that this is an active land use application that is currently under review by the City of Sisters Community Development Department, and it is tentatively scheduled to be heard by the Sisters Planning Commission on June 1, 2023, at a work session, and on June 15, 2023, at a hearing where public comment will be taken. Prior to that, your comments will be more effective if directed to the city's principal planner, Matt Martin, who will ensure that they are shared with the Planning Commission. This can be done via email or by dropping off your written comments at City Hall Monday through Thursday between 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. or Friday from 7:30 a.m. to noon. As an appellate body, the City Council may be required to hear this application in the future and are therefore advised by the city attorney to try and avoid ex parte communication. Ex parte communication is communication outside of the public record and where the applicant and other participants aren't present to hear and potentially dispute the substance of the communication made. According to the Sisters Development Code, participants in a Type 3 hearing are entitled to an impartial review authority as free from potential conflicts of interest and pre-hearing ex parte contacts as possible. Thank you. How many do we have?
We have 4 written comments that were sent in for the record that council has received. That will be part of the permanent packet. And then I have 4 speakers, starting with Charlie Stevens.
Mr. Stevens.
Good evening, Charlie Stevens, 1086 West Collier Glacier here in Sisters. I'm here for 6A, your agenda item 6A tonight. And I was surprised to see that on the agenda. I've spent the last few weeks spending a lot of time rummaging around in the Sisters housing needs analysis and ordinance 526. And just from the housing needs, and I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming most looks at the urban growth boundary and its expansion have to do with housing capacity. Most of the ones I've ever looked at, that's at the core of all of the UGB expansion. It's not 100% true, but the housing needs analysis, the 2021 update said that we had 102 net acres of residential land that was zoned here in Sisters, and that we would need 1,100 housing units by 2041, 20 years down the line from 2021. And they said that looking at the zoning and the acreage that we had inside the city limits and the urban growth boundary as it is, we could build 996 housing units. Now, for round numbers, 1,000. So we need 1,100, and we could build 1,000 in the 20 years. However, that was based on the zoning at the time, which for single family units was 5 per acre, and for multifamily was 15 units per acre. In Ordinance 526, you folks doubled those densities to about 8 to 10 units per acre for single family, 30 units for multifamily, as I recall. And by my math, when I add that up, it sounds like we can build about 2,000 units now on that same acreage, and we need 1,100. So I'm not really understanding how we're 15 years early looking at the urban growth boundary. Maybe there's a rational explanation for that, but some of us will like to know what that is when the time comes. I'd like to hang around and do this, but I got to go manage my horses here and do some work for the East Coast before tomorrow. So anyway, I thought I'd put that on the record. I've been studying the housing situation quite a lot lately, and I'm going to be studying it a lot more. And the numbers just, to me, don't add up to a consultant looking at the adequacy of something that looks like it's good for about 15 years. So, thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments.
Bill Carmichael, please.
I should have said, Charlie, Mr. Stevens, thank you for being under 3 minutes. Appreciate that.
My name is Bill Carmichael. I live at 1610 West Williamson Avenue here in Sisters. I'm also here to speak on the 6A item. I'm just wondering if any of you share the concern of slowing the growth down in Sisters at this point in time, understanding that there's quite a feeling among the community that we're moving much too fast as it relates to growth. And I don't know what you feel individually, or if you feel that there's no real concern as it relates to that. But most of the people that have been coming to a lot of the Planning Commission meetings and come to these meetings are here because they're concerned that we are rapidly approaching maybe even different than what the last speaker said, needing more land. But the question is why? What will we do with more land inside the UGB? Will we simply issue more permits to more developers, to more people to build more houses so that we invite more investment and more of these people to make more money off of the land that's out there that's not currently in the urban growth boundary? And where will this all end? And what will it do to the ambiance, to the DNA of Sisters as we have all known it? I'm not anti-growth, but I am for taking a breath and slowing down and trying to make some concession in terms of the feeling of the people. The city council works for the community. It works for the citizens. It works for the people here. It doesn't work for Salem, and it doesn't work for the investors or the developers. It works for the people. And if the people have expressed, and I think they have, considerable concern about where we're going and how we're going there, it seems to me that that's something that the city council needs to take very seriously, rather than saying, okay, we're going to spend some money now on hiring a consultant so we can figure out our UGB growth. Maybe we need to hire a consultant that will help us figure out how we can address the issues that most of the citizens feel in terms of the type of growth, not only the growth, but the type of growth that's now being improved. We all know that you have the power to change codes. You have the power to add codes. You have an ability to change the process that we're seeing now that it seems to most citizens is not in keeping with what they want. So my comments, I think, and I wanted to be on the record, that we may not need at this juncture to hire a consultant to figure out how we get more land inside that we can then issue developer permits to make more money off of the people of Sisters but that we stop and take a deep breath and figure out if this is really the direction that we should go and that we want to go. And if there's any way to push back on Salem for the 50-year development one-size-fits-all program that they have, that seems to be the driving force for everybody as it relates to, well, our hands are tied, we have to do what they tell us that we have to do. And yet they've made exceptions in the past, and it could be that Sisters is unique enough to also get some exceptions as it relates to that. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Joe Rambo?
My name is Joe Rambo, 304 East Adams Avenue here in Sisters. Tonight I'm here as the board president for Sisters Habitat for Humanity. I'm here today, I'm here today to inform you that as of last Thursday, May 4th, Executive Director Charlene Weed and Sisters Habitat for Humanity concluded a long and extremely productive relationship. Over the course of her 27 years guiding the organization, Charlene used her strong will, ingenuity, and vision to help the fortunes of over 75 local families here in Sisters with the dream of home ownership. Personifying Habitat's mission of putting God's love into action by bringing people together, building homes, community, and hope, she worked tirelessly in the pursuit of that goal. In addition to her steady leadership with the organization, she found time to serve over 8 years here on the City Council, served on the Board of Neighborhood Impact, and has been instrumental in the launching of the cold weather shelter. As a testament to the team Charlene created, she leaves behind a very strong and capable group that is excited about the opportunities going forward. Chief Operating Officer Peter Hoover has been tasked with the role of interim executive director and will use his years of experience and steady hand to continue guiding the ship. On behalf of Habitat, we look forward to starting a new chapter working with the City of Sisters to help address both affordable and workforce housing. Over the next 90 days or so, I'll be taking a more active day-to-day role as we navigate a new path forward and encourage any comments, questions, and suggestions to be directed to me at president@sistershabitat.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Michael?
Wiry thing I have to get into to get this done. I don't like it. And I made it as short as possible to let me finish it because I used up a lot of time previous just getting ready to write this. A person who lives in the vicinity, known even outside this country, involved in the older agrarian farming ways and lifestyle, is married to someone who worked in a local store no longer in existence. I spoke to her a few times. Without any previous commentary on the issue, she once blatantly said, "This is not a community." This is 5+ years ago and always saw me when I existed out of my duffel bags, and I probably had told her about my spinal injury. She told me who she was after I saw the Farm Journal on the counter, commenting I've known about her husband now 4 decades ago through a manager who knew him on a small farm with a summer camp, hospice, etc. When I wasn't working a paying job, I always volunteered at a variety of places. At this particular location, without following a set system, I pulled weeds, planted, shoveled what needs to be shoveled around Mambles, did trail work, built small bridges, washed summer camp dishes, etc. I bring this subject up because being a person who gets involved straightforwardly, where and when needed, without self-serving motives, and has his hands on into the work ethic without ego is something I've done since 10 years old. When doing work with complete concern, including how it affects the whole world, and when it begins when still young and virgin-esque, a person can become a truly whole, real, genuine person. And those who are self-addicted and possessed or simply have no appropriate evolution can never be truly understood by someone like this, or be alien, even recognized as the antithesis of anything even close to human, aside from their talented pretense. For myself, what made me was profoundly influenced by this, though I did not need to be demanded by parents, elders, social or cultural or spiritual rules. People are blank slates when born, nor are born the same. I was born with a large heart, a deep conscience, and soul. And particularly these days, guess what? How lucky for you that you were not. A few will know immediately what I'm speaking about. A few have thought my making it to the age 30 is a miracle. What do you think it does to a person who exists with this work ethic and what else has been mentioned, and the society is run by the very unevolved with well-paid jobs, with benefits, with all the modern day amenities, including safe home, car, etc., and are the judge, jury, and executioner, show up out of nowhere, evil mothers and evil fathers, and essentially are playing a satanic god on a person's past, present, and future. And it goes on, and everyone else either is as or is more guilty. For evil does not thrive when good people do nothing. Evil thrives when conscience-dead pieces of hell do nothing. What does it do to a person? In this case, amongst other things, it creates insanity, which can actually be best done to the person most foundationally sane, which those who are evil need to subdue or bring down. And making them ill works just perfectly, a perfect usurpment. Evil ratchets of both sexes. I'm not sexist. They both of both sexes have evil balls. And this also creates what's called psychotic. And in context definition, and an in context definition of what a psychiatrist outside the box many decades ago used by witnessing, it was nothing more, nothing that frightened or was distasteful to him either, than a way for a person to save their soul.
Michael, you've been fighting.
I got to finish. Of course, what do you modernizing artificials understand about real soul, or about a real person, or about real evil? To me, you are the very serious problem, not someone like Donald the Clown appropriately smearing bleep in your face, even if he's mostly unconscious of it all. Where did this outside-the-box psychiatrist find where real, genuine evil reside? Prominently coming from those blending in with social normality and dignified homes and jobs and religion, politics, law, etc., and psychology and all variety of health services, including managers, etc., managers pulling the strings with evil, corrupt power over someone else who in a real human community would be just a haunting spook story, sometimes told around the fire. What do you do now? That's already been told. Appointment with county commissioner taken seriously? And how about the question, do you want a sickly homeless in your sweet gingerbread town with tourists buying into it until I die? The answer should not be blowing in the wind. That's for pieces of hell. Sorry, Bob. It should be 3 words, all with 3 letters. Yes, I'll act. And anyone who's serious can easily reach me. You know my name, and even the sheriff deputies will pass on a message. They should know by now I'm very ill, though you know what's going on, though who knows what's going on in the heads of people who are not screaming, tell everyone Donald Trump is supposed to be an antagonizing creep. Creepy clown. Supposed to be a creepy clown, okay? We are the ones unconsciously backwards and truly evil. You have confirmed it to me year after year. Now, doesn't that sound like a topic to speak to a psychiatrist about? I'll bring my insanity with me. I do not cloak myself. That's evil's job.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. Moving on. Next item is the consent agenda.
I would move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion.
Excuse me, we have comments on the phone here.
So visitors communication via the online
We have,
sign up prior to the meeting, but I would be happy if the mayor would like to
That would be
bring
fine.
you in. So can you introduce your name and where you live, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's actually Scott Penzarella, 511 West Cascade, the Left Coast Lodge. Thank you for allowing me to have these 3 moments to make a quick comment. It's actually in relationship to the workshop that you just hosted, so thank you for that. I just wanted to bring up a quick point as a business who has been doing a lot, putting a lot of energy and time into this fire resilience subject in particular with an old business. And I just wanted to share a quick perspective on some of the comments that were made after those great presentations related to what appear to be some simple tasks that can be done or compared to some of the larger things that are required to truly harden a home or harden a building. As someone who has a 75-year-old establishment, I can assure you that it's literally just scratching the surface to put on certain types of screens and other measures. Some of the larger costs that businesses like ours would harness would come in the forms of tens of thousands of dollars, where most of the fire officials would say it counts. So as it relates to the fire marshal's comments about, potentially grants or funding by the city or the state to be explored, that would be something certainly we would truly appreciate, as hardening such a large business that is in a critical position relative to the rest of the homes and businesses and sisters. It would be a very large expense, one that we would like to take on, but I think one that is, I think probably indicative of other expenses that other businesses and homeowners would have in that moment. So myself and other small business owners have talked, hoping the city will look a bit more closely at exploring opportunities related to either grants or other funds that may become available to help some of the old businesses harden in our efforts to participate in that citywide, well, hopefully citywide program. So thank you for that. And then just one quick comment related to the other issue that came up tonight. We have expressed our concerns to planning, and I would like just to reiterate the same thing, that we are also concerned significantly concerned about the UGB expansion and the lack of analysis and data, as the other person said, related to all of the available lands and possibilities that exist already in Sisters today. So I just wanted to make sure I put that on the record as well.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Is there anybody else on the Zoom call that would like to make visitors communication comments?
Okay. All right. So we had a motion and then we had a second. Is there any discussion at all on anything on the consent agenda? Okay. I just want to give somebody an opportunity just in case they did. If not, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
That was all of us. Thank you. Okay, on to council business. It's the hot topic of the day. Discussion and consideration of motion to approve a professional services agreement for an urban growth boundary sufficiency analysis. And that is our Director of Community Development, Scott Woodford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
How are you doing today?
Doing great, thank you. How about you?
You may get some hard questions.
Okay, I'm ready for it. I expect it.
Good.
For the benefit of the folks in the attendance tonight and on the Zoom call, Scott Woodford, Community Development Director. And as you mentioned, this is a request for council approval for a professional services agreement between the city and MIG, which is a planning and consulting firm that engages in this kind of work. They are formerly APG, or APG was purchased by MIG. You'll recall APG is the firm that helped us out with the comprehensive plan and has done quite a bit of work, the housing plan update and the efficiency measures. So some folks are probably wondering what is a urban growth boundary sufficiency analysis? It's a framework for evaluating the results of the housing needs analysis and the economic opportunities analysis in the context of the UGB. And its goal is to determine whether these analyses indicate the city currently has enough land within its UGB to meet the 20-year needs. It is not an actual request to process an urban growth boundary amendment. It is just basically a summary of all those studies and kind of an indicator of if the community were to pursue an urban growth boundary amendment, what they'd be looking at in terms of land need for residential uses, employment uses, parks and recreation needs. It also could include public facilities and schools as in terms of that analysis as well. So just to give you a little background to kind of how we got here, I wanted to jump back a little bit and remind the community of the process that we went through in 21, starting in 20 and going through 21 to update the comprehensive plan, the Sisters Comprehensive Plan. And when you do so, there are requirements it incorporates both public input and the results of technical analyses that inform the direction of the comprehensive plan. A lot of those things or all those things are dictated by the state, and all the communities follow the same protocol. But one of those is probably the most important is the housing needs analysis. And what that analysis does is takes a look at what the population projections are for 20 years out. You'll recall that all of our master plans have a 20-year horizon in terms of how far they look out in the future. And we take the population projections that are provided by Portland State University. They're the organization deemed by the state to be the official population projection entity that we all have to utilize. And so that equated to a certain number of housing units that would be necessary to accommodate the population growth by 2042, I guess, was the target date. We also, at the same time, are required to do an economic opportunities analysis, and that's to take a look at, it's a kind of an opportunity for the community to take a look at what kind of employment businesses that the community wants to recruit or develop or retain in our community. The requirements of that give us a lot more flexibility as a community to decide what types of industry, what types of employment uses we want to have in the community. And then it has some studies and some calculations in terms of how many employees those kinds of industries create, and how much square foot per employee, and what the floor area ratio of a employment use is. A lot of different sorts of calculations that they use to spit out the number of whether we have enough land to accommodate those needs, those goals. And then we also do a buildable lands inventory that takes a look at how much vacant land do we actually have in our community left to accommodate these uses. Things that are obviously vacant, things that are semi-vacant. Sometimes there's things that are underdeveloped that could be redeveloped, or like a small house on a big lot. Obviously there's potential for redevelopment there. So it takes a look at and makes assumptions about those things. And then we did a UGB sufficiency report at the time that kind of collated all of this information. And you'll recall that one of the recommendations was we need anywhere between 0 and 100 acres of residential land. It determined that we were pretty good with employment lands at the time. Determined that we did need 13 acres of additional parkland, but that could be incorporated within those residential areas. And then as far as schools and public facilities, at the time it seemed like we were okay with what we had. Well, a couple of years have passed since that point, and what this contract proposes to do is to update those numbers. Last year, Portland State came out with updated population projections that pretty dramatically increased our population projections, so that has effect on our future housing needs. We went through the efficiency measures process, where we took a hard look at things we could do to utilize our existing land in our boundaries more efficiently, and we even made some code amendments to accommodate some of those, including increasing the top end of the multifamily allowed density, and also the floor. We raised the minimum density because we were concerned about getting single-family development in our multifamily zones. So we did take some steps. Some things we didn't. We chose not to do, and that's fair. That's what we determined as a community. And then, we also, on top of that, our council goals was to, I guess, take all that information in and make a determination whether or not whether we want to pursue a urban growth boundary amendment as a community in the next year. But in order to do that, we needed to update those numbers to have a fresh look and kind of understand completely what we're contending with here. So that's the purpose of engaging with the consultant again, is to freshen up those numbers. It's just, like I said, it's not an actual amendment. It's just a sufficiency report. They'll give us the tools as a community to decide that. And so part of the proposal is to update the housing needs analysis, update the employment projections and the employment land capacity analysis, and then kind of collate all that into an updated land sufficiency analysis. It's supposed to take about 6 months. Will be presented in public meetings, both with the Planning Commission and with the City Council. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for the public to weigh in and to be involved in the process. So, contract's worth about just a little over $25,000 to do that work.
Okay.
So, any questions?
I think we probably all have questions. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
I think I want to go first. If you don't mind. I don't do that very often. Would you say it's fair to say that if we didn't do this, we wouldn't be informed enough to decide down the road? 6 months, a year down the road. I mean, it would be a little absurd to not do this and get these numbers before we can make a decision to and have the discussion with the public about a UGB expansion. Is that correct?
I think that's correct, especially with all that's transpired since the last time that we did this report, with the increased population projections, and we need to determine what the effect of the efficiency measures is on some of that housing demand. So I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm I'm not one that likes to just throw $25,000 around for no reason. So, but if it's a good reason, I think that this is a good one. I would like to remind everybody in the room that in the year 2000, the town was about 900 people. By the 2010, it doubled. And at this point, if you took from the year 2000, we're 3.5 times bigger. I think that this is my personal opinion, not your guys, just mine. This is an exercise that we have to go through. This is an exercise we should go through. And we're not just dealing with future growth, we are, but we're also dealing with the current growth. I mean, the growth that has happened very recently. So it's a very difficult thing that we're doing. But without new numbers, we can't make an informed decision. That's just my thought. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay. That's well said. I think it's important for the folks in the audience and online to understand that when we did our goal setting this year, we made a goal that said we wanted to update the sufficiency report to help us determine whether or not we needed to do something like this. And that was because of the efficiency measures, some of which I didn't like, but there you go. And the goal, in my mind, was to attempt to stave off or even not do a UGB expansion by adopting these measures. We don't know, we don't have the staff power, the people in the room. We don't have enough people on the staff in your division to do this type of complex analysis and tell us if the changes we made are going to help us. That's why we need someone to do that. This does not mean that the UGB expansion will happen, or doesn't mean it won't happen. It means we're trying to make an informed decision so that we can inform our community, you people in this room and the other folks online and the people in the community, about what may need to happen, and then we can have a discussion about what we're going to do. But without the facts and the information, we're flying blind. And I personally don't necessarily buy the numbers that came down from Portland State, but maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part. However, that's why I'm in favor of this, because we asked staff to do this very thing.
Okay. How are you doing? How are you feeling? Go ahead. Okay.
No, I think my question was answered.
Okay. Well, yeah, I just had a couple, well, I do have one question. What, do we have any timeline from the state on doing a UGB analysis and discussion of, a full-blown one, not what we're talking about tonight? This is different.
So you're referring to the timeline to actually process an urban growth boundary amendment itself?
Yeah.
The best estimate that I've gotten from our consultants who do these all over the state is that it's an 18 to 24 month process.
And we don't have any pressure from the state to implement this yet, or are we getting close to that? Because ultimately the law is that we need to more or less try to keep a 20-year land inventory. And we are not at that place, so
Right.
I'm assuming that starts triggering.
Yeah, we haven't identified housing, we haven't adopted or acknowledged housing needs analysis from the state that identifies the need for additional housing. Yes, we can accommodate some of those within our existing boundaries. The original study said we could accommodate our multifamily, but we were short on accommodating single family, which the housing needs analysis, if you'll recall, predicted 70% single family in the future, 30% multifamily. So, but that's kind of what we need to do, is to kind of reevaluate all that and kind of understand better what we're looking at, what we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely don't want to walk into a UGB discussion with bad data. I want the freshest, crispest data possible. So and there's been a lot of changes in the last couple of years, since that comp plan process. So this makes sense to me. I mean, I would want the best data possible. So Yeah, and in regards to the efficiency measures, just to note, I mean, that was something, that's a work in progress as well. It wasn't a one-time deal. There was a lot of things in that. And those reports that we will continue to hopefully, be put in front of us and address later on. So it wasn't a one and done situation. So I'm looking forward to more things come up on my, on my packet about that, hopefully. Yeah, I think that's all I had.
A couple of things. Well, if we do an analysis ending in September, which seems like it's only 4 months, not 6 months, would the analysis include the number of housing that are potentially to be built in the Woodlands and Sunset Meadows?
Yeah, it would, now that those are approved projects, we can count those.
So we can count
Yeah.
the ones that are, because I had a real, a strong sense that there's so many on the books that are being potentially built that would significantly change, or at least have an impact on the analysis. And so that's why I felt it was important that we needed to do another analysis, because I felt the time period when we did it couldn't include what we foresaw was going to be a big surge in housing in the near future. So I'm glad that even though it hasn't been built, we can take that into consideration. I just wanted to say that I moved to this area in 1988. This community in all of Oregon was in a recession. It was still a quaint little community, but it was a community that was hurting. There weren't a lot of people who wanted to visit here. There weren't a lot of people that wanted to stay here. We didn't have a high school and a junior high. There weren't jobs for the kids who graduated from families here to come back and live in this community. But it was a forward-thinking community. And the councils at that time and the leadership in the community got together and did updates of comprehensive plans. They did 20-year projections. So that we today have this community because the leadership back then did what we're doing now. The reason that we have this fabulous community that we all cherish and want to preserve with every fiber of our being, that has great roads, great parks, great water, great community involvement, is because past leadership did what we're trying to do now. And that's look at the projected numbers of people who are going to move here. And don't be don't believe that if we don't build it, they won't come. That just isn't happening. People want to live here. Most of the people in this room were not born here. Most of the people came here because of this beautiful community. So people are going to come, and whether they displace current people or they get into housing that's new, they will come. So we have to make sure that we have room for the people that are already here, their children, when they want to come back here and live, that we have jobs and housing that they can afford to live in, because it's very difficult if you don't have many types of housing to have any kind of affordable housing in a community like this. And so that's what we're trying to do, is be prepared for what is likely to be 10 years down the road and 20 years down the road, instead of putting blinders on and saying, oh, if we do nothing, everything will stay the same, because it won't. And we have the last 20 and 40 years of growth to show that if you plan for it, it turns out much better than if you try and ignore it and assume, well, if we do nothing, everything will be just fine. So that's my speech for today. Thank you.
There's a little saying, plan to fail, fail to plan to fail. So, do you have anything else, Susan?
I was wondering, on the comp plan requirements from the state, can you expand on what cities are required to do? Just as brief as you can, unless that's too big of a question, I'm not sure, but.
So I'm just going to try to narrow it down a little bit. Are you talking about in terms of updating your comprehensive plan or?
Well, each city is required to do a comprehensive plan, but why are they required to do that?
Why? Well, they're required because of the statewide planning law that requires every community in Oregon to have a comprehensive plan, and to update that plan. Larger communities are required to update their plan more often. The thinking is that smaller communities aren't growing as fast, and don't need to do so, and that the burden of the cost burden is great on smaller communities. So that rule has changed. Sisters obviously, is not growing slowly. They have a lot of, issues that a comprehensive plan update would help to better address. So I think that's why the community here made that decision to update its comprehensive plan, even though it wasn't a requirement by the state to do that. It was just good planning. This community forward thinking wanted to be a planning community. So that's, I believe, why they chose to update their comprehensive plan.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the state would not allow funding if cities didn't go through the procedures that they're asking for, like having a comprehensive plan ready?
Well, each community does have to have one. It's just a matter of how often they have to update them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We ended up doing it, isn't it recommended 20 years, and we did it at 16 or so?
I mean, most master plans, they're 20-year plans, but you really recommend updating them every 5 to 10 years, depending on how fast your community is growing.
I believe that if we do nothing, if wash our hands of it and walk away, the state can and probably would step in and do something, and it might not be something we want. But that doesn't mean I'm in favor of or not in favor of a UGB expansion. What I'm in favor of tonight is getting information so we can make an informed decision. That's all this is about. And I see some of the things in Nextdoor, I've seen some of the things online. We're not talking about a UGB expansion. We're talking about getting information so we can make an informed decision. And it's, don't just listen to social media, you get your facts. And that was very clearly stated in the documents that went out. So that's where I am right now. I mean, we asked in our goals that you folks do this. The time to have addressed that would have been when we were doing goal setting.
Right.
So my other question was on the rate of the 25,905, not higher than.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that that's like a going rate for 3 people working on this project?
Yeah, I think, in the Schedule 2.1 has a breakdown of.
Yeah, I saw it.
You saw that, so yeah, it's itemized here, in
Yeah, I
terms of.
saw that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it just seemed high to me. But I was
Inflation's
asking if it was a
yeah.
going rate, because I don't know. I don't
yeah.
do these things, so.
No,
Yeah,
it's a good question.
okay.
Lastly, this is a probing question about the future. Can you explain the difference between the UGB expansion and annexation, please?
Sure. So an urban growth boundary is just a, sort of an imaginary line drawn around communities that is your 20-year supply of land that exists until annexation in the county. So those parcels that, if you're in an urban growth boundary in a community, those property owners can stay in the county. It's their choice whether they want to propose to be annexed into the city. And in fact, many of these parcels stay in the county for quite some time. You know, it's not like this is a big mad rush for annexation as soon as an urban growth boundary is expanded. It's based on the market and based on the property owner desire to do so. So if you're in the urban growth boundary, you stay in the county until the property owner wants to develop, and then they propose annexation into the city.
And so the last time we expanded the UGB for housing itself was 2005, right? So it's been 18 years. We have no urban growth land outside the city limits at the moment, except for very small strips of land along highways and things like that.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any final questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So if we were to expand, I want a clarification. My understanding is we can expand a little bit north and a little bit east, but not south and west and north that way, north, east, west.
Well,
right? I mean, because of the forest that surrounds us.
that's a whole
nother issue.
That's a whole nother ball.
That'll be another consultant, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
And it's a long question, yeah.
Yeah, we don't know.
Just to briefly touch on that there, if you go on the website from the existing UGB sufficiency analysis, it does a little bit of a summary in terms of what that process looks like, in terms of how the state requires us to analyze which lands were to be brought in and which ones are less eligible. I can send that to you.
But to be clear, we're not looking at a UGB expansion. We're not even looking where it's going to go.
No.
What we're really doing is trying to determine what our efficiency measures have done to improve the supply of land and what the construction in town has done to improve the supply of homes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Anything else for Scott? Scott, I think we have all the information we need.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If there's any other questions, I think we're going to deliberate a little bit, and I think we should, but.
Can I make another comment based on what?
No, I'm sorry. Sorry, we have processes for that. Please feel free to email though. I mean, we're here to listen. The one thing I want to say about this whole process is, again, identifying, getting information to identify what we need to do. The biggest and most important thing of the comp plan that we went through, most of us went through to build, and that I signed and endorsed as mayor, is that we want, the people up here want the livability of town to be absolutely as good as we can make it. This town, I know we have a lot of tourists and we love our tourists, but we all live here. We all live in the city and we want it to be good as well. But we can't do nothing. We have to manage it, and it's not easy work. There are tough decisions. There's hard conversations, and we're going to have them. We're here to have the conversations. We're not up here to do nothing about growth. We can't do nothing about growth. We have to do something.
We're really lucky to have these conversations because a lot of states do not have the land use laws that Oregon has.
Right.
And that is what makes Oregon, so amazing. And that's why we're all here. 50 years of our land use laws, brought into effect by a Republican governor named Tom McCall, who did not like urban sprawl in the 60s, didn't like, billboards everywhere, and didn't like gas stations popping up all over the place and strip malls and all that kind of stuff, and saw, forest land and farmland being chewed up willy-nilly with no process in place. For better or for worse, it's been 50 years in this process, and it's, I feel like it needs to be revisited a little bit and retweaked after that amount of time, but it has served our state phenomenally. It has preserved our rural areas. It has preserved land next to urban areas really well. It has made the state the place that we all love and call home. So I take my position here very seriously, and especially in these these regards because I have a lot of, knowledge and with this history of the urban growth area. And I've lived in other states, and I think everybody in this room has lived in other states, and there's a reason why we live here now. So I take that burden very seriously to carry that torch in regards to things like urban growth expansion or comprehensive plans or planning for the future. Because no, we do not only work for the people in the community today within the City of Sisters and the people who elected us, which we take very seriously. We, as Andrew alluded to, we work for the people 5 years from now, the citizens 10 years from now, the citizens 50 years from now. And we're not given a magic glass ball to see what the future is like to help that process. So we do the best that we can with the tools that we have. And so one of these tools is having the best data possible to make the decisions for ourselves. So.
Okay, anybody else? Gary? Okay, Susan? I think we can entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve a professional services agreement with Goldsman Inc. Can't even pronounce what I don't.
MIG.
Icopano, yeah, MIG, for an urban growth boundary sufficiency analysis in an amount not to exceed $25,905 and authorize the interim city manager to execute the agreement.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. Good discussion. All right, next up, what do we got? Let's see. I have to go to the back of the page. Creekside Park Memorial Bench.
Chris, I'll introduce you real quick.
Okay, sure.
So Chris Knight, the Executive Director of Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, is here to request to put in a memorial bench adjacent to the Whitechoose Creek Trail on the south side of the creek. And he took this request to the Parks Board. The Parks Board approved it. They did want to see a maintenance agreement, which you have in front of you. And now we have to go through an approval process with you all to, since the memorial bench falls under the public art policy that the city has. So we have the agreement. Both parties are good with the agreement, and we just need to get this in front of you and let you decide if you want to see it there or not. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. Chris Knight, I'm the Executive Director of the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council. We're based in Bend, but we've just celebrated our 25th anniversary last year and have done a lot of projects over the years on Whitechoose Creek. So tonight I'm talking about something a little bit different, but it relates to Creekside Park, where just this past August, worked with Paul and the City of Sisters to implement a project there. You may have seen some of the work we've done there, but there's 4 new access points down to the creek. There's some stone steps down to the creek that people can get down to the creek and enjoy it. We also fenced off the other stretches of the creek and replanted the area. But a gentleman we worked closely with, Andrew Dutterer, he passed away September 2021. Car accident, got rear-ended on I-5 by a semi, left behind a wife and young son. And so we worked closely with Andrew. He worked for the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board and supported a lot of this work that we've done in Whitechoose Creek over the years, including a grant for the project at Creekside Park that we just did. So if we move down to the next slide, Andrew's family is interested in creating a memorial for him. And so we thought about some different locations, and we've landed on this idea of Creekside Park. And so like Paul mentioned, the location of the bench and rock and plaque that we're considering would be in the location where that red star is, right along Locust Street, at one of these creek access points, and you can see a picture of it there. It's on the upstream side, on the campground side of the park. And So the family would pay for this memorial. Like Paul mentioned, a agreement has been drafted by the city attorney. The family is prepared to sign that. It outlines the roles and requirements related to this memorial and who would care for it over time, et cetera. Yeah, I'll go ahead to the next slide. Thanks, Gary. And so this slide just shows where we're talking about locating the bench. And so it would be a wooden bench. We're looking at working with local artist Skip Armstrong to carve it out of a ponderosa log. And so it would match with that spot there with the star around ponderosa trees. There's no picnic table or bench at that location, so that's one reason the family liked that, and it would be an added amenity for the park and adjacent to this new access point, the steps down to the creek. The memorial, would, in addition to the bench, would also include a boulder that we would place near the bench or near the fence, and that would have just a plaque attached to the boulder that would memorialize Andrew. Next slide. And I share this, this idea. This is a spot along the Deschutes River outside of Bend where there was a bench and there's a rock and a plaque. This area is owned by the Bend Park and Rec District. And, this was something we took a picture of and showed to the family when they were considering a memorial, and it just inspired them. And so they want to do more and create something, a bench that's really memorable and wonderful. Next slide. So we've had some preliminary discussions with Skip Armstrong, and I just share this to give you a sense of what might come. Skip has created 3 drawings. The family is still considering which drawing they like, but this drawing shows what the bench would look like carved out of the log. It would have river otters. What you can't necessarily see from the drawing is the back of the bench would show Whitechoose Creek or a river. It would show salmon and steelhead coming up the river, so a really nice connection to the river. Skip's also drawn up an idea of a bench with a cougar. Another one has owls. So I'm in the phase of talking with the family about what speaks to them, but I'm hopeful it'll be some connection to a river theme, given Andrew's love of rivers and a fisherman and all that. I think that's all I wanted to share there, just that we're developing some concepts. And maybe there was one more slide. I'm sorry, Carrie. Yeah, and just this is a picture taken from where the bench would be sitting, so you get a sense of, people walking along the trail, or they come over the footbridge there at the park. They can stop, they can take a break, they can sit at the bench, and they're looking out over the creek, out over the park. So like Paul mentioned, I spoke with the Parks Advisory Board, shared this idea. They made a recommendation to the council that they wanted to approve this memorial. Yeah, so I just thank you for considering that, and happy to answer questions you might have.
Is there anybody here who's on the Parks Board? Hey, can you? I wasn't actually at the meeting. I was in Iceland. Oh, okay. So, but in my opinion, having worked before I was on City Council, when I was on the Parks Board as a member, with the initial plans for Whitechouse, and then COVID interrupted and all the other fun things came down the line. I can see why the determination and dedication of the individuals who put the money together to do this are feeling pretty strongly. I think it's nice that they want to do it here as opposed to many of the other locations that they worked with. I have no concern other than I'm not sure how long a ponderosa log will last once it's been carved sitting out in the weather, but that's not really part of what this is about, that was my only concern, and I don't think that's enough to say let's not do this. It is establishing something new. We haven't done this in the parks, I don't believe, except,
The veterans in.
yeah, the veterans, yeah. And so I think it will be unobtrusive. I also believe it will be an asset because people do like to sit there.
Okay, Susan, go ahead.
I'm all for art in the park. I just think it would be an asset, even not knowing who it's for or why it's there. And so I appreciate the family offering this to us. And if it happens,
Jennifer, you have anything?
Yeah, I have a little bit mixed feelings, you know, like Ms. Counselor Cobb said that, you know, it is an honor that they've chosen this location in our community. Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, he was not a member of our community. That's, I think, you know, a little bit of, you know, a gray area for me, and trying to look at this and then in future iterations, you know, moving forward. I don't feel like we're gonna get one of these a week or anything from now on. Hopefully not. But you know, that's really the only thing I have the question about. Otherwise, you know, obviously we're very thankful for his service, and what he and others did to help this community with that creek. You know, I think one advantage is that, you know, the memorial, especially the plaque, shows obviously it's a dedication to him and his family and his work, which is very nice. I think it also puts a face on all of the faces that have worked so hard to bring that creek back alive, after being basically dead for decades. And there isn't yet anything in regards to that creek right now in the community or along the creek that kind of tells that story or even hints at it, of the huge human effort that it took to bring that river back to life. So yeah, I'm on board. I just, yeah, I just have a little bit of a concern of setting a precedent.
Me too.
That's all.
Okay. Andrew, do you want any?
I think it's fine, and if you know, you have concerns about that, then maybe we should look at setting a policy. We don't really have one now. I think the relationship of the person and the family to the site is enough that I think it warrants allowing that. And I think that it'll be a good addition. And I want to thank you very much for being a partner with us in some activities that we would not have had an opportunity to do without your help and expertise. Thank you very much.
I just have one quick comment about the work. You know, every year I stand at the bridge and watch the water go down that creek because I live across the street, or a little bit across the street. This year it's a different creek. Water moves differently, sounds different, it pools more, and it's a great bit of work. And given that it had to be scaled back to some degree from the initial thoughts based on funding, I still think it's a tremendous asset, and I believe you folks achieved your goal. And from my perspective as someone who sees it daily, it's a changed channel. It's not a channel anymore, it's a creek now.
Thank you. And I will just make one more comment, Jennifer, your comment. We are planning interpretive signs as part of the project that is going to tell that story that you were asking about, that will help tell the story of, you know, why we did the project, but what's happened with this creek over the last couple decades. You know, how it was dry most every summer 20 years ago, and now we've changed that. And when I say we, it's a large group of partners. So thanks for your comments, though.
And I'll follow up with, I'd be honored to work with the family to make this good. And to be honest with you, I want to be there when it's dedicated, if you don't mind. So please invite the mayor, or if I'm not the mayor, invite me anyway, please.
Me too.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you. All right. Staff comments. I wrote Paul's name down first, so come on up, Paul. Thank you, Lieutenant Davis. Have a good evening. Be safe.
Okay, we got some good news tonight, which is always good. We were successful in our fuel reduction grant. So we got approximately $72,000, exactly what we asked for. with no local match. And that's going to cover our hazard fuel mitigation projects that we have at the wastewater treatment plant, at Well 1, and then up on Edgerton Road. So yeah, great news there. That work is continuing. We should have Edgerton, they have everything down on the ground. We should have it pretty well cleaned up in the next 2 weeks. So bring that project to a close. We are hoping, fingers are still crossed, that the Oregon Transportation Commission, OTC, up in Salem is going to approve the grantee list for the STIF funding that we applied for. And this is for phase 1 of the East Portal. That goes to them next week. We seem to be getting good thumbs ups from our partners at Region 4, but it still has to go in front of a committee, and yet, people that have to make decisions. So
How much is involved in that?
a little less than $1 million. Yep. And we are getting ready to submit a new grant application under ODOT's carbon reduction program. This will be approximately $220,000 grant or project. The grant ask will be about $200,000, and there's a 10% match. So we will bring that to you at the next meeting for approval to submit that grant, since there is a pretty decent sized match with that. And that would be to design and construct the EV portion of East Portal and provide the covered parking as well as the solar panels on top of the covered parking.
Does that, Paul, may I interrupt with the question? Sorry. Does that include the conduiting and stuff to make that happen?
That includes the upgraded electrical service, all the conduits,
Okay.
full install.
Cool, thank you.
So that would bring us to about 1.2 million for that project. And if you remember from the master plan presentation, that project with the EV chargers was about 1.7, but there was about $400,000 worth of contingency in there. So we're getting pretty darn close to be able to pull the trigger on that phase 1.
And our match is 10% of 220? Is that what you said?
10% of the 220, yeah.
So that's like 22 grand.
22 grand, yep.
Okay.
Not bad.
Good work.
Yep.
Return on the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes me, yeah, okay.
So something was mentioned about CEC, Central Electric, and their vegetation program that they're doing right now. They've started at Black Butte. They're working this direction, following that main line, that main trunk line called the Jordan Road line, all the way through Sisters and back to Redmond, essentially. So I met with those guys today because a portion of that line does go across our Lazy Z property. And they told us their plan is to essentially go 15 to 20 feet from the outside edge of the lines and have no vegetation in that area. So you're looking at basically a 30-foot swath through there. There's not a lot of work on ours, mostly a small juniper, potentially some lemon and some pine trees, but no significant pine tree removal, which is good. But they will also take a look at, if there's leaning trees, there's dead or diseased trees, which we didn't see today, they'll remove those as well. So that work is a good thing for the community, coming at the right time.
Is there anybody screaming along the line about them doing this? Any property owners?
I don't think so. It's just a long way around the barn when you have to work with the Forest Service. So, but they're able to, get approval to do it. And then last night, I'll let Councilor Blum talk specifics, but Public Works Advisory Board approved or recommended approval to the Planning Commission for the water and wastewater master plans. So we'll take that to the Planning Commission next Thursday, and then we'll bring it to you all on the 24th of May. So good news on that end.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
That was a lot.
Sorry.
No, it's good. A lot of good stuff. Any questions for Paul, anybody? Keep up the good work.
All right, great.
Thank you. Scott, why not? He's playing solitaire, so.
I can finish my game.
Caught him.
Don't have a whole lot other than just to reiterate that the Planning Commission also had the benefit of a wildfire awareness presentation last week. So I think they enjoyed that. And they also got a little presentation from Emmy on the historic story map that we put together with some grant funds that we got through the county, which was passed through from the state, which was passed through from the Park Service. And we used that money to hire a consultant to put together, basically take historic preservation surveys that we've done in the past, or that was recently done in 2019, and put it into a story map. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that concept. It's kind of something you can kind of page along online, and it kind of brings to light, the properties that are either designated historic or have potential for future designation. And so we're trying to publicize that because May is Preservation Month in addition to Wildfire Awareness Month. And then I was gone, but they did a retreat follow-up and just kind of talking about how they really appreciate the work session formats, that is an opportunity for them to talk outside the structure of a planning commission meeting. It's pretty regimented oftentimes, and so they appreciate the ability to put their imprint on things, or share their ideas in a work session format. So we're pretty consistently doing those every month. Their first Thursday work session, third Thursday public hearing. So they like that. Paul talked about the water master plans that are going to Planning Commission next week. We talked about space age dates. Arbor Day event, I think sounds like that went off really well. Thanks to Emmy for putting that together. Public Works assisted, obviously. The mayor, you came out, I believe, and nope.
All of us.
All of you guys were out there. Great. So thank you for doing that. We also hosted the U of O bicycle planning course students here last Friday for a site visit, and 35 of them came to town. And thanks to the mayor, I think you were participating in that as well. Thanks to Emmy and Matt and Jackson. I think Paul and I were both gone that day, but they led some tours. We're wanting them to focus on taking a fresh look at the Washington Avenue Bicycle Boulevard to get their thoughts. It's in our TSP, to get the students kind of ideas in terms of how we could also maybe look at that differently, if possible. And then they're also taking a fresh look at some of the pedestrian bicycle access connections and amenities at the East Portal site, even though that's still hot off the press. It's good to have a component of folks that are expressly looking at the multimodal, the pedestrian component of it. And they'll probably offer some opinions on things we didn't even ask them to as well.
They will.
Yeah.
I was here for the questions and answers. I just gave some brief welcoming remarks like Scott has me do once in a while. But then they had some questions and answers. But I really got the impression they just wanted to go out and they did two groups. One walked and one rode bikes, and then they switched. So they both did the same thing, and they wanted to get outside. They were. You're young, you don't want to sit there with a bunch of fuddy-duddies. You wanted to, get out there and look at the work, and it was good to see. I mean, that's what you want.
Plus they just gotten off of a bus ride, a 2.5-hour bus ride, so I'm sure they're ready
I
to.
was disappointed they didn't bike over, come on.
Yeah.
No,
If 242 had been open, they might have.
maybe. Anyway, thank you, sorry to interrupt.
And just a reminder about the June 1st end of year celebration for the Sustainable Cities program, that they're going to have all the presentations of all the projects, kind of a culmination event. It's supposed to be at the elementary school, but I guess that location is up in the air, so they're searching for another spot. We have a planning commission meeting at the same time, so they can't do it here. That's where they're looking at, yeah. I'm going to be doing a Let's Talk next week on parks and open space. I think they called Paul first, and Paul referred him to me. So I'll be talking about the Parks Master Plan a little bit. That's 6 p.m. And then
Where's that gonna be?
that is at, where is that at? Is that where is it? Okay,
At the bookstore, yeah.
When's that going to be?
that's Monday night,
Oh.
15th, 6 p.m.
It's in the Nugget,
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
Because they're also doing the emergency.
You don't have to come. You'll be bored to death.
I would not.
I think C4C is also doing the emergency preparedness event tomorrow night as well. They got, so yeah, I was a little confused because they have a lot of events
There's
stacked
a
up.
lot of stuff going on.
Good, they're going.
6:30?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry,
7?
6 p.m. So, I have 6.
You just told me 6:30, so I show up after it was over, I know.
It's actually at 7. Looks like there'll be some grant funding opportunities from some of these housing bills that have been coming through the legislature for assistance in local governments for housing planning support and UGB planning. So maybe we can maybe we can get some grant funding for the project that we're already doing, which is just a report, just an analysis.
All right. Anybody have any questions, comments?
Just a comment, I was on a way out of town on Friday and saw a big clump of tall, young people standing around the corner on Washington, kind of in where the guy parks the moving van all the time. And I said, geez, what's all those people do? I said, I think it's the bicycle committee. So I'm glad to hear that's what it was, and it wasn't like something else that I was more of.
Biking.
I like being right once a month.
You never know what their shady work they're.
By the way, I'm waiting for Michael to accidentally hit one of those with his hammer when he hammers it.
They're going home. I'm not even eating here. So, thank you, Scott.
All right, thanks.
All right, Joe, Carrie?
Yeah, all right.
Joe hasn't said a word, so I'm sorry. Right?
I had attended the Explore Sisters board meeting where they're working on launching, and they did launch actually their social media accounts yesterday. So if you'd like to follow them, Facebook and Instagram both. It'll be a little bit of a slow start. They're going to reach out and try to get a catalog of photos that they can use, and they'll be reaching out to a pretty large number of people the lead next week, trying to build that catalog up. So
Who was that again? I'm sorry.
Explore Sisters.
Oh, thank you.
Is doing that. City Club is next Thursday, the 18th. There'll be a discussion on the house list. Cheyenne Purrington will be part of that. Andrea and I are attending. And then the EDCO lunch for those attending is next Monday, the 22nd. And then I just wanted to, it's interesting that the CEC came up as far as the kind of the fire mitigation with the power lines, because I was called today by CEC as they must be working on their emergency plan to make sure that our contacts for emergency events like fires were up to date. So they are definitely working their plan right now.
Good. Anybody have any questions for Gary? Thanks for letting us know about Explore Sisters so I don't have to.
There you go.
Thank you. All right, Joe.
My turn. Okay. So a couple things. Just want to touch on the audit report a little bit. As you well know, Rob is very, very thorough. Some of the points that he talked about, I kind of, as Gary pointed out, talked about the ARPA, and that's kind of a timing adjustment for allocations. Not really something mission critical there. And then the reimbursement agreements, that was something, again, that wasn't caught 2 years ago. So that was kind of the result of that. So, and those are something that really don't lie materially on our financial statements anyways. And then as far as the metering, he brings that up every year. And does that make sense to you also? Typically, we read meters on like the 24th or 25th of the month, and then we bill at the end of the month. So that 5 or 4 day gap is always that adjustment. So that will live there every year. And sometimes, based on staffing levels with Public Works or in finance, we'll read the meters a little earlier. So that gap could be a little bit bigger. If we read them on the 23rd, say, it could be a little bit more, especially in the summer months. And then, so the URA, and you know this drill really well, we've done that kind of that debt exchange a little bit. And we've actually researched that a lot just throughout the state in terms of, the legalities of that and your ability to to take tax increments. So we're comfortable with that. And again, you'll see in the budget that we'll be doing another one of those rounds. And I mentioned that to you, I think, before next year. And then, some of the other stuff, trial balance, URA adjustment, those are kind of nitpicky things that, if I was an auditor, I probably wouldn't present in a public meeting, but because he probably knows I'm not going to say what I always want to say. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. A couple other things. Participated with Lieutenant Davis with a couple interviews this last week with patrol deputies. That was great. There's some really good people in place. It just speaks to the culture that he's really cultivated here. These are great folks. We have kids in schools here. For I think at least one of these deputies, and one of them will be backfilling the school resource officer. So we're actually taking in two. But yeah, just I can't speak enough about Chad's Lieutenant Davis's leadership and his ability to attract people in a difficult time to recruit law enforcement officers. So those went really well. Very impressed with just both those people. And then we did have a follow-up meeting with Republic about the workshop a couple meetings ago, and that went. I think that was productive. They're going to come back with some different numbers for us to take a look at, and we'll kind of come back to you with something else. So a lot of work's being done on that end, and they've been a great partner with that too. I think they understand where we're coming from, and likewise. So we're making good progress there.
And it's good to see all the trash gone from the streets, and all the mounds of leaves.
Yeah, they're working hard now, aren't they? Trying to make it look better. Lastly, so budget season. If you remember, kind of in the early budget process, we talked to each one of you about scheduling and whether or not budget meetings would work well during a council week. And we said that there was kind of mixed feedback there. But I think we came to the conclusion if we get the budget book out earlier, it would help you prepare a little bit more. And I'm proud to say that with staff's help, we've got a really good draft budget book together right now. I'm not going to knock on wood and say we'll get it out tomorrow, but you should get it out with plenty of time in order to read it, digest it, ask questions about it. And if you do have any kind of pending questions that you think might be just kind of clearing the air or informational, I'd be happy to discuss with you before the meetings, or we can just discuss it at the meetings. So I'll just bring it up now. Mayor salary? Mayor salary, it's hidden in there. It's hidden.
Yeah, it's zero.
Just say it. Okay.
I want my salary as a counselor,
Yeah, there you go.
commissioner. There you go.
I just wanted to say that meeting with, I said this to you earlier, Mayor, but meeting with Carrie and Joe today on that really large audit, I had lots of questions and they got them all answered for me, so I didn't have to spend a lot of time here. And so I just wanted to say I really appreciated that.
You bet. Thank you. I'm just glad nobody lost their temper.
And I just want to say that this is the fifth public auditor that I've had the privilege of reading documents from. And over all my years in different agencies. And two things struck me: that they aren't doing their job unless they find something wrong. And when you have a real good, clean audit, they really, really, really struggle to find something wrong. And that's what I saw when I looked at this, was that there was minutia. A couple of things they needed to call out, because you have to call them out, like the ARPA funds. That's very understandable. But some of the others were really being kind of picky, including discussing ending fund balance and things like that. It's not the auditor's job. So that was what I got from it. And like I said, 99%, I do read all the text. Don't read all the financials, but all the text, because that's where you find the little hidden things. And there was nothing in there, and I was very pleased to see that, even though it took us a long time to get it.
When he doesn't give A's, so you get a B++. Right. Let's assume the same as last year. Yeah.
So when will we have the next one?
So the next one, we already have an RFP for audit services, because this was actually the second year of the extension. Yeah. And I know this is kind of a mind bender because we're in 22-23. We just looked at 21-22, and we're doing budget for 23-24 here in a couple weeks. So Yeah, we've put our feelers out in that process to some other municipality-focused auditors that hopefully will get, because last time I think you were on the board for that, Andrew, we only had 2 people interested. It's just, it's a very, that's a very technical, very specific area of auditing. It's not a kind of it's not a risk-based audit as much as a for-profit audit would be. But hopefully we're able to get a lot more interest and then make some decisions from there.
And I think they don't let them graduate from audit school unless they can prove to professors that they can find something wrong in a clean audit.
Right.
We definitely don't want to pay them by the word.
Most of it's boilerplate.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions for Joe? Is that it? You got everything?
I think I got everything. Yep.
Okay. It's up to us. I wrote Jennifer's name down first.
Okay. I attended the EDCO Pub Talk 2 weeks ago in Bend. That was a lot of fun. I hadn't been able to do that since I've been on the board. And I was inspired because there was a sisters-based business, Trail Butter, was doing a presentation there as well. So kind of there for moral support. So that was a lot of fun. Thanks for that team for putting it together. And then attended the tree planting. So again, thanks to Emmy and everybody for putting that event together. That was a lot of fun. It's definitely a park that needs more trees. So that was
Yeah. It could use another,
happy to make my child participate in that process.
a few dozen more.
Yeah, and the only other thing I did today, I sat in on a webinar for ODOT on their community EV charging station grant program, which I keep kind of bothering some key members of city staff about. It's an opportunity. It's a nice pot of money to pay towards EV charging stations. And the great takeaway from this webinar, at least, was while it's being kind of geared towards multifamily properties, which is great because they're places that are lacking a lot of EV charging. Municipalities can also participate in two functions. One, we can either place charging stations in our right-of-way that are adjacent to multifamily housing. Sometimes they don't have the parking or the infrastructure to do that, or the owners who have the will to take that on. But the other thing is municipalities like us can apply for that funding, even if it's not related to housing, but it's more public areas, so parks or shopping districts, things like that. So that was exciting because that kind of really blew open possible opportunities there. So been chatting with CEC a little bit about that too, on their ability to kind of help out with that process and offer consulting and some smaller rebates to stack on top of that. So that was my homework for the week. That's it.
Cool, thank you. Anybody have any questions? You ready to go?
I spent a week in vacation recovery and ready to start back up.
Okay.
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. Okay.
Went to the Public Works Advisory Committee last night and got the first whiff of the water and wastewater plant.
Yeah, she went there.
I went there, yeah. It was a good presentation. What you will get in your packet is going to be, once again, enormous, and some of it is eye-opening and some of it is way over your head. But the group had a few good questions that they were able who thought, had anything negative to say about it. They all thought looked like good proposal, and those who had not been involved in the Lazy Z part of the water disposal treatment were blown away by that. So that was cool.
Am I allowed to ask what the number is? 22, okay. Well, I've been working with Paul, over the last, I don't know, month. We knew it was 20 to 25 or somewhere in there, so.
Big money.
Yeah, you hit the middle. Good job.
The only other thing, Charles, the governor's money that's going to be allocated, the 14.2 million in Central Oregon, is the proposals had to have been in Monday of this week, and they 18-person review committee.
The MAC.
Yeah, the MAC will be reviewing them and having their decisions within a couple of weeks. I said it'll be, I didn't get a specific date, but it will be interesting to see. The sisters community did end up submitting a proposal of which parts or none of the above could be parceled out, because there was several different segments to the proposal. And so we'll see what happens. They've said that they will let us know as soon as they hear if there's any results. So we will hear when they do. That's it.
Okay, any questions about that?
That's money that has to be spent pretty fast, too.
Mhm.
By January?
It has to be spent by January 4th or something like that.
Oh.
So that was part of it was a very I looked at the forms that they had to fill out. I cried for them. I really did. I went, that shows you how dedicated those people are. I mean, they got together and spent hours and hours and hours, and Cheyenne walked them, baby stepped them through it as much as she could and helped out considerably, I'm sure. But I'm not sure if I was handed that, if I wouldn't have said, whoa, what are the odds we're going to get any money? I might, I was really impressed that they were able to put it all together.
Can you expand on what sisters would propose or ask for?
No. Okay. No,
We didn't get copies of applications or anything like that.
No,
We just heard bits.
right, and they are prudent to leave us out of the loop for the most part, because then it becomes a public discussion item, and until there's some recognition of the proposal actually coming to fruition, then there's no point in going there, I guess is the things, but they will let us know. And if it is approved, well, then it becomes public record.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I've got a few things. Yeah, the first thing was, I'll do it in calendar order or chronological. Friday was Cinco de Mayo, and that was my 6th anniversary of me closing on the house here in town. And I wanted to get a house in town so I could be involved with council. So it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't got a house, right? So that was kind of cool. I went out to dinner with some friends. I want to thank Eric for being here. Our EDCO rep I just see him everywhere and doing stuff, and I just appreciate that. So I went to Cocoa. I have my list of notes and stuff. I had 12 meetings in less than 8 hours or 9 hours, and super informative, mostly about water. We're trying to get that stream restoration package through. While we were there, we heard that the money projections coming out on the 17th, the revenue projections are not looking good. Early is the early word on the street, so it might not be as big as we want, but I think we're going to get something done because it's in the drought package, and that's something that's going to pass, I'm pretty sure. So the other thing I learned at Cocoa was I did talk with, let me get the thing right, the person I talked to, this Oregon Housing and Community Services Special Initiatives Director, and shared the CHARO acronym with him, because the state people didn't. When I said CHARO, he looked at me funny. And I said, no, it's CHARO. This is the Central Oregon group that Cheyenne's doing. He goes, oh, well, I didn't know you guys had a name for it. So apparently now the state's going to use CHARO as well, which is cool. The other thing he said was their whole housing group at the state level, and is super impressed with Central Oregon's ideas, even before they had the actual applications. Not just ours, there's other people in Central Oregon that are going for money. He said that our region is leading the state with actual solutions that might move the needle a little bit. And kind of nice to hear.
It is.
I'm just talking about my area, so I was happy to hear that, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Friday, I don't know if he talked about it, prescribed burns right across from the high school.
Right.
I hope they don't burn down the disc golf course, because I'll be parked over there too, so I don't want that to happen. But I'm gonna be there. I have my Eventbrite ticket. I don't think they'll be asked to show it, but maybe I'll use this to start a little piece of the forest on fire in the correct area.
So you have
Did
the
you
right
give them your
booth.
Romex suit size?
Yeah.
I
What?
didn't have the right booth. They
Yeah.
said you had to have certain kind of
Well,
boots with
they're
certain kind
providing
of
something,
soles.
they're providing some things.
Suits, but not boots.
Yeah, you have to have these. You have to have a
vibrant
vibrant
sole.
sole leather boot. Well, they won't let you do it.
I don't have one of those.
I don't have that either. I'll just go barefoot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll run me off, I don't know. I'm gonna go anyway.
You can get them at Dixie's
Okay.
or,
Borrow.
So anyway, you guys can go too if you want, but you have to like sign up, so.
yeah.
And the last thing I wanted to say is good job, everybody, on the whole growth issue in UGB. I mean, again, I don't have to go through the whole thing, but I know nobody's up here just for themselves. I know that we're all up here for the community. I appreciate all the good comments. They might not like our argument. They might not like where we're coming from, but we're coming from a place that's proper and correct. And so just thank you all for thinking before you speak, and we all think before we vote. I mean, that's what we do. So thank you all for that, and I'm done.